Did Hitler create the Autobahn?
Though the first modern freeway system in Germany was begun in 1913, Adolf Hitler did create the Autobahn during the Third Reich, from 1933 to 1945. The Autobahn is a freeway system that includes 6,800 miles, 10,941 kilometers, of road across Germany. Though it is widely believed that there are no speed limits on the Autobahn, there are a few segments with marked speed limits.
Where are hot springs used by people around the world?
Hot spring baths have been used in cultures throughout the world since ancient times. They are found in such places as Japan, Taiwan, Australia, the United States, Iceland, and Sicily.
What is a willy willy?
Willy Willy is the Australian name for a hurricane.
Where is the Maghrib?
From the Arabic word for place of sunset or western. The Maghreb is a region of northwest Africa composed of Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Sometimes Libya is also included. The name Maghreb remains from the term used by the Islamic Empire for this region.
What are the sources of air pollution?
Air pollution has two main sources: anthropogenic, man-made, and natural. Man-made sources of pollution include factories, cars, motorcycles, ships, incinerators, wood burning, oil refining, chemicals, consumer product emissions like aerosol sprays and fumes from paint, methane from garbage in landfills, and pollution from nuclear and biological weapons production and testing. Natural sources of pollution may include dust, methane from human and animal waste, radon gas, smoke from wildfires, and volcanic activity.
What is the best way to help after a disaster?
Disaster relief agencies such as the Red Cross are in vital need of money after a disaster to purchase necessary items for victims or provide financial support to them. Call your local chapter of the Red Cross to find out how to help. Donating food or clothing places additional burdens on the agencies in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, as personnel are not available to sort, clean, or distribute donated goods.
What is Aotearoa?
Aotearoa is the Maori name for New Zealand. It means the land of the long white cloud.
Where was the first commercial air flight?
On January 1, 1914, the first scheduled commercial air flight took passengers from Tampa Bay, Florida, to St. Petersburg, Florida. The service, which lasted only a few weeks, took one person at a time over the 22-mile, 35-kilometer, route.
How dry is Antarctica?
Though Antarctica is covered with ice, it is the driest continent on the planet. The ice in Antarctica has been there for thousands of years, and the continent receives less than 2 inches. 5 centimeters of precipitation annually. The Sahara Desert receives 10 inches, 25 centimeters, each year.
How was Taiwan created?
In 1949, following the Communist Revolution in China, the Chinese nationalist government, led by Chiang Kai-shek, fled to the island of Taiwan and established a Chinese country there. When the nationalists arrived, they were met by indigenous Taiwanese and Chinese who had been living there for millennia. Although the island has never been controlled by modern China, successive governments have been disputing this territorial issue since 1949. For about 25 years. Most governments of the world recognize Taiwan, the Republic of China, as a sovereign country. After President Nixon's policy of extending relations to the People's Republic of China in the 1970s, China has pressured all countries in the world to not recognize Taiwan, which has one of the most developed economies in the world. The United States extends de facto recognition to Taiwan through unofficial channels, and it still considers Taiwan to be a very strong ally. China has threatened the use of military action if the Taiwanese ever vote for independence from mainland China, and, in effect, officially form their own country. Proposals for degrees of independence by the Taiwan legislature have been met by threats from the Chinese government.
How did the United States obtain the Virgin Islands?
The United States purchased the Virgin Islands, which includes 3 main islands, St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas, along with 50 smaller islands, from Denmark in 1917 to help defend the Caribbean Sea. Just under 100,000 people live on the islands, which are now a territory of the United States.
What is the largest city in the Amazon River basin?
Manaus, Brazil, is the largest city in the basin, with a population of just over 1.6 million. Manaus is the capital of Brazil's largest state, Amazonas, and is a major trading center for the region. When the Amazon basin was the only known source of rubber, Manaus experienced a boom, but subsequently declined in importance due to the planting of rubber in other regions of the world. Manaus has since recovered by becoming a duty-free trade area of 1.6 million people.
Will California eventually fall into the ocean?
No, it will not. The famous San Andreas Fault, which runs along the western edge of California from the San Francisco Bay Area to Southern California, is known as a transverse fault. This means that the western side of the fault, which includes places like Monterey, Santa Barbara, and Los Angeles, is sliding northward with respect to the rest of the state. In a few million years, the state's two largest urban areas, San Francisco and Los Angeles, will be right next to each other. The fault is moving at about 2 centimeters, just under an inch, a year.
Do oceans get more rain than land?
The oceans receive just over their share, percentage-wise, of the world's precipitation, about 77%. The remaining 23% of precipitation falls on the continents. Some areas of the world receive far more precipitation than others. Some parts of equatorial South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and nearby islands receive over 200 inches, 500 centimeters, of rain a year, while some desert areas receive only a fraction of an inch of rain per year.
Is childbirth still a significant cause of death for women?
From the beginning of time until the mid-20th century, a leading cause of death for young women was complications during childbirth. Now, in developed countries, there is almost no risk of death during pregnancy and labor.
Why are we losing groundwater?
Water is pumped from aquifers around the world for irrigation, industrial, and household needs. Aquifers do not refill as rapidly as water is being pumped out. So in many areas there is a danger that some aquifers may disappear altogether.
How does South Korea rank in the world economy?
South Korea ranks 13th in terms of its per capita GNP, gross national product, of $20,000. It is also the United States' seventh largest trading partner. Its economy is one of the fastest growing in the world, expanding at nearly 7% per year.
What is Mardi Gras?
The Catholic festival Mardi Gras literally means Fat Tuesday in French. Parades, dancing, and carnivals are all part of this pre-Ash Wednesday celebration. Known as Carnival, it is very popular in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and New Orleans, Louisiana. The Brazilian festival is a significant source of tourism-related income for the country.
What's NAFTA?
In 1994, Canada, the United States, and Mexico entered into the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA, which reduces tariffs and economic controls between the three countries.
How did the Guano Island Act help fertilize America?
In 1856, the United States Congress passed the Guano Island Act, which allowed the United States to take possession of any unclaimed island that contained guano. Guano, the excrement of seabirds, was mined for use as fertilizer before the widespread use of chemical fertilizers. Beginning in 1857, the Baker and Howland Islands, located southwest of Hawaii, were mined by the United States until their guano was depleted in 1891.
How do cartographers shape our world?
Cartographers are map makers, and cartography is the art of map making. Cartographers map neighborhoods, cities, states, countries, the world, and even other planets. There are as many types of maps to make as there are cartographers to make them.
How early were the islands of the Pacific explored?
Polynesians, the people who settled many of the islands in the South Pacific, brought their people, culture, and knowledge to the islands before 1500 B. CE experts at celestial navigation, reading the currents, flight patterns of birds, and how to travel in light canoe-like crafts. The ancient Polynesians left New Guinea and traveled first to the areas we know of as the Solomon Islands, then on to present-day Vanuatu. As the distance between islands became even greater, they refined their boat-making ability to create ships with double hulls that were able to carry animals, people, and trading supplies as far east as Hawaii and even Easter Island, which is 2,237 miles. 3,600 kilometers, west of Chile. By the year 1000 CE, Polynesian culture could be found in a gigantic triangle, the Polynesian Triangle, spreading across thousands of miles of ocean.
How many islands make up the Maldives?
There are approximately 1,192 islands and islets within the territory of the Maldives, of which only 250 are inhabited. Of the inhabited islands, some are actually hotel resorts only. As the islands have only enough space for 1 or 2 hotels. The Maldives lie about 600 miles, 965 kilometers, southwest of India.
How did Israel become a country?
European Jews, who had been persecuted for centuries in Europe, began to emigrate to the area we know as Palestine in the late 19th century. These new immigrants purchased land and set up communities in the vast desert and coastal areas. This area, which was under British administration, began to see a new influx of European Jews in the early part of the 20th century. After World War I, the United Kingdom issued the Balfour Declaration, which accepted the establishment of a Jewish state in present-day Palestine. At the time, Palestine was not comprised of countries, but was merely a collection of territories ruled by colonial powers such as the United Kingdom, France, and the United States. After World War II, hundreds of thousands of European Jews emigrated to the region, enough to cause the Arab community to revolt and riot against them. At this time, nearly 33% of all people in Palestine were Jewish. Jewish paramilitary groups increasingly fought against British occupying forces. The United Nations recognized Jerusalem as an international city for both Arabs and Jews, and it approved an interim plan to divide Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. The Jewish authorities accepted the plan, but new Arab countries that formed after World War I and World War II did not. One day before the British mandate of control over the Palestine region expired in May 1948, the State of Israel was proclaimed.
Where is the longest fjord?
The longest fjord is in Greenland, Scoresbydund. It stretches more than 217 miles, 350 kilometers.
What do deserts and polar regions have in common?
Deserts and polar regions both have average rainfall of less than 4 inches, 10 centimeters, per year. They are both the driest places on Earth.
Where are the East and West Indies?
The East and West Indies are separated by half the planet. The West Indies are islands in the Caribbean, including the Greater Antilles, the Lesser Antilles, and the Bahamas, while the East Indies include islands that encompass Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. When Christopher Columbus reached the New World in 1492, he believed that he had actually found a shorter route to the East Indies. Thus, Columbus thought the islands he had reached made up a portion of the Indies and considered the islands' inhabitants to be Indians.
Is the Tasmanian devil a real animal?
The Tasmanian devil is a real animal, though it resembles few characteristics of its cartoon counterpart. The real Tasmanian devil is a carnivorous marsupial that lives on the island of Tasmania, just southeast of the Australian mainland.
How long does it take to travel by train across Russia?
Depending on the number of stops the train makes, it can take anywhere from 5 to 8 days to travel across Russia. Ticket prices can be anywhere from $500 to more than $10,000. Which allows for the most pampered class of service. Train lines end in Irkutsk, Beijing, China, and even Vladivostok, along the eastern Pacific coast.
Who owns all of those islands in the Pacific Ocean?
There are hundreds of islands in the Pacific Ocean. While many are part of independent countries, others remain colonies or vestiges of colonial empires.
How is hail formed?
Hail is ice that is formed in large thunderstorm clouds. Hail begins as droplets of water normally destined to become raindrops that are blown upward and subsequently freeze. They then fall lower within the cloud, where they collect more water, are blown upward again, and refreeze. The hailstone grows larger as it collects more and more ice, and eventually falls to the ground.
What are volcanoes?
Volcanoes are the result of magma rising or being pushed to the surface of the earth. Hot liquid magma, which is located under the surface of the earth, rises through cracks and weak sections of rock. The mountain surrounding a volcano is formed by lava, called magma, until it arrives at the Earth's surface. That cools and hardens, making the volcano taller or wider or both.
How did Australia get its name?
Long throughout history there remained an assumed, yet completely undiscovered land called Terra Australis Incognita, or unknown southern land. As early as the 4th century BCE, Aristotle believed that an extremely large continent, located in the southern hemisphere, lay undiscovered and would complete the symmetry of the land masses. For centuries, this unknown landmass remained a treasured legend and often appeared on maps in varied sizes and shapes. When the territory now known as Australia was discovered in the early 17th century, no one believed that this was the famed Terra Australis Incognita. During the early 17th century, the western coast of this territory was named New Holland and claimed for the Netherlands. In 1770 James Cook claimed the east coast of this territory for England and called it New South Wales. It wasn't until 1803 that Matthew Flinders circumnavigated this territory and proved that it was a continent and was the long sought after Terra Australis Incognita. Finally, in the early 19th century, nearly 2 centuries after having been discovered, this land was finally named Australia.
Why are road maps so difficult to fold?
The problem lies with the multitude of folds required to return the map to its original, folded shape. The easiest way to fold a road map is to study the creases, and to fold the map in the order that the creases will allow. But once you've made a mistake, the folds have lost their telltale instructions. To fold a road map, begin by folding it accordion style, making sure that the front and back of the folded design appear on top. Then, once the entire map is folded accordion style, fold the remaining slim, long, folded paper into 3 sections. And, voila, your road map is folded.
What major American city loses more people than any other?
Detroit, Michigan, loses more than 25,000 people each year. 3 times as many people as any other metropolitan area. It leads all other cities in the United States in negative population growth. By comparison, the Dallas/Fort Worth, Texas area continues to lead the United States in terms of population growth, adding more than 160,000 people each year.
Is the Gregorian calendar accurate?
Almost. It is still 25 seconds longer than the solar year. Therefore, After about 3,320 years we will be a full day ahead of the solar year. The keepers of time will have to deal with this problem when the time comes.
What is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge?
We don't get to appreciate the beauty of this huge mountain range because it's located at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. With one exception, Iceland is a part of the ridge. The ridge is a crack between tectonic plates where new ocean floor is being created as magma flows up from under the earth. As more crust is created, it pushes the older crust further away. The new crust at the ridge piles up to form mountains, and then begins to move across the bottom of the ocean. Because the earth can't get larger as more crust is created, the crust eventually has nowhere to go except back into the earth. This is where subduction occurs.
What is Micronesia?
The region known as Micronesia consists of islands east of the Philippines, west of the international date line, north of the equator, and south of the Tropic of Cancer. Approximately 600 of the islands in this area united in 1986 to form an independent country, the Federated States of Micronesia. Those 600 islands join the Federation. There are approximately 1,500 other islands in the region, including the independent countries of the Marshall Islands, Kiribati, and Palau.
Where is the largest coral reef in the world?
The Great Barrier Reef is the largest coral reef in the world. Located just off the northeastern coast of Australia, it extends for over 1,200 miles, 1,930 kilometers. Much of the area is now protected as a marine park.
Where is the farthest point from an ocean?
In northern China lies a spot that is over 1,600 miles, 2,574 kilometers, from any ocean. Located at 46 degrees 17 minutes north, 86 degrees 40 minutes east, the land is equidistant from the Arctic Ocean, Indian Ocean, and Pacific Ocean.
How did the Ukraine help feed the Soviet Union?
Often called the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. The Ukraine's rich wheat harvests were used to feed the USSR. Now, as an independent country, Ukraine produces 4% of the world's wheat and exports much of it to Russia.
Who was the first person to reach the North Pole?
Though American explorer Robert Edwin Peary is credited as the first to reach the North Pole, it is likely that he only came within 30 to 60 miles, 48 to 80 kilometers, of 90 degrees north during his expedition in 1909. Who did actually reach the pole first is still being debated.
What is the lowest point on dry land?
The world's lowest point is still the Dead Sea shoreline. At approximately 1,378 feet, 420 meters, below sea level.
Why does Hawaii have interstate highways?
Since any freeway funded under the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 is known as an interstate highway. Whether it crosses state boundaries or not, Hawaii can have interstate highways. Though they cross no state borders, Hawaii has 3 interstate highways, H1, H2, and H3.
What percentage of Americans volunteer each year?
More than 26% of Americans volunteer in some form each year, which means nearly 61 million people donate their time.
Why was the border between the Yemen and Saudi Arabia dashed on maps?
In the sandy desert between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, the border between the two countries was in dispute. A treaty signed in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in July of 2000 resolved the conflict. And maps no longer show a dashed line between the two countries.
Are there more people or sheep in New Zealand?
There are just over 4 million people in New Zealand, but nearly 56 million sheep. New Zealand has long been a leading exporter of wool.
How many cities are in the United States?
There are approximately 18,440 cities and towns in the United States, the vast majority of which have fewer than 25,000 people.
Who owns all of those islands in the Pacific Ocean?
There are hundreds of islands in the Pacific Ocean. While many are part of independent countries, others remain colonies or vestiges of colonial empires.
What is a dike?
A dike is magma that has risen up through a crack between layers of rock. When this magma solidifies, it becomes very solid rock. If the rock around it is eroded, a dike can form great rock monoliths above the ground.
Are lines of longitude and latitude all the same length?
No, they are not. Only the lines of longitude are of equal length. Each line of longitude equals half of the circumference of the Earth because each extends from the North Pole to the South Pole. The lines of latitude are not all equal in length. Since they are each complete circles that remain equidistant from each other. The lines of latitude vary in size from the longest at the equator to the smallest, which are just single points, at the North and South Poles.
What is the deepest lake in North America?
Northwestern Canada's Great Slave Lake is the continent's deepest, at 2,015 feet, 614 meters. The lake is named after the indigenous people who live near the lake, the Slave.
Which is further west, Los Angeles, California, or Reno, Nevada?
Though Nevada is California's eastern neighbor and Los Angeles sits on the Pacific coast. Reno is farther west than Los Angeles. Reno is located at 119 degrees 49 minutes west, while Los Angeles is located at 118 degrees 14 minutes west.
What is the oldest public park in the United States?
In 1634, William Blackstone sold 50 acres of his land to the town of Boston. This pasture land was set aside for common use and called the Boston Common, making it the oldest public park in the United States. The Common is situated in front of Massachusetts State House and has always been open public land.
Does air pressure change with elevation?
Yes, it does. The higher you go, the less air, or atmospheric, pressure there is. Air pressure is also involved in weather systems. A low-pressure system is more likely to bring rain and bad weather versus a high-pressure system, which is usually drier. At about 15,000 feet, 4,572 meters, pressure is half of what it is at sea level.
What is the oldest map using the word America?
The map, acquired by the Library of Congress and dated 1507, incorporates many of the findings of the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci. The map was thought to be lost, but was rediscovered in 1901, and was kept in a castle in Wulfig, Germany, for more than 350 years.
War with Iraq?
Numbers and methods used to compute the statistics of dead and wounded in Iraq vary considerably. From a high of over 1.2 million people, Opinion Research Business, which is more than the Rwanda genocide, to a low of 654,000 people, Lancet Survey. As of 2008, over 4,000 Americans have lost their lives in Iraq since the war began. How much money have U.S.
What is the difference between relative and absolute location?
There are two different ways to describe where a place is located: relative location and absolute location. Relative location is a description of location using the relation of one place to another. For instance, using relative location to describe where the local video store is. You might say that it's on Main Street, just past the high school. Absolute location describes the location of a place by using grid coordinates. Most commonly latitude and longitude. For instance, the local video store would be described as being located at 23 degrees 23 minutes 57 seconds north and 118 degrees 55 minutes 2 seconds west.
What two countries emerged from Czechoslovakia?
Czechoslovakia was created at the end of World War I, 1918. By the Allies as a new country containing the area where the Czechs and Slovaks live. In 1967 and 1968, Czechoslovakia attempted to move away from communism. But the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact countries invaded, squelching such aspirations. This Prague Spring, as it was known, was the first military action taken by the countries of the Warsaw Pact.
Do all roads really lead to Rome?
Not anymore. During the time of the Roman Empire, the Romans built a massive road network to ensure easy travel in all weather conditions between Rome and the furthest reaches of the empire. The Romans made their roads as straight as possible and paved large sections of them by precisely piecing together cut rock to make a flat surface. Along the 50,000 miles, 80,000 kilometers, of Roman roads, markers were placed every Roman mile. Just short of a modern mile, so as to indicate either the distance to Rome or to the city where the road originated. After the fall of Rome, the maintenance of the Roman road system was severely neglected. And during the Middle Ages the roads became overused and dilapidated. Though the Romans built these roads over 2,000 years ago, some segments are still in use today.
What is the population of the United States?
The U.S. population is approximately 304 million people, with one person being born every 7 seconds. One person dying every 13 seconds, and one international migrant arriving every 30 seconds. Yielding a net gain of one new person every 11 seconds.
What is the DART array?
DART stands for the Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunami Array, which consists of 39 buoys that float in critical spots in the Pacific. Each DART system consists of an anchored seafloor or bottom pressure recorder, BPR, and a companion moored surface buoy for real-time communications. An acoustic link transmits data from the BPR on the seafloor to the surface buoy. The BPR collects temperature and pressure at 15-second intervals. In normal mode, it transmits the data every 15 minutes. If there is an event, the system reports back data collected in 15-second intervals every minute.
What is a central business district?
A central business district, CBD, of a city is located downtown, often where the city began, and is the primary concentration of commercial buildings.
Is a magnitude 10 the top of the Richter scale?
While the media often refers to the Richter scale as being on a scale of 1 to 10, there is no upper limit. Even though the strongest quakes are not as high as 10, it is incorrect to assume that a 7 is on a scale of 1 to 10 because the magnitudes are based on the energy released and it is a logarithmic scale.
Military attacked or occupied since the beginning of the year 2000.
The U.S. has invaded or occupied 14 foreign lands since 2000, including Macedonia, Afghanistan, Yemen, Philippines, Colombia, Iraq, Liberia, Haiti, Pakistan, Somalia, Georgia, Djibouti, Côte d'Ivoire, and Sierra Leone.
How many indigenous people live in the Arctic?
More than 4 million people live in the Arctic. They are spread across national boundaries in such places as Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Scandinavia, and Siberia.
What was the Maginot Line?
The Maginot Line was a defensive zone that was built in the 1930s to defend France against the possibility of a German invasion. The zone consisted of underground tunnels, artillery, anti-tank obstacles, and many other defensive structures and stratagems to slow down invading Germans. The Maginot Line stretched for approximately 200 miles, 322 kilometers, near the French-German border. During World War II, when the Germans did invade France, the Germans bypassed the Maginot Line by storming through neutral Belgium. Thus, the Maginot Line had failed its one great test because it was too short. The line was also rendered obsolete by the fact that it did not provide defense against the new modern warfare that included aircraft.
When do countries in the Southern Hemisphere observe daylight saving time?
Because daylight saving time is an effort to save daylight during the summer months. Daylight saving time in the Southern Hemisphere occurs from October through March.
Which natural disasters doesn't Southern California experience?
While urban Southern California is plagued by earthquakes, wildfires, floods, landslides, and tornadoes, yes, even tornadoes, they rarely receive snowstorms or hurricanes.
How does geography influence politics?
Geography is a key component in many political decisions and actions. The borders of countries, location of natural resources, access to ports, and the designation of voting districts are a few of the many geographical factors that affect politics.
Who are Kiwis?
One nickname for a New Zealander is Kiwi. But kiwis are also a flightless bird and a type of fruit found in New Zealand. Kiwi birds, a national icon of New Zealand, have long thin beaks and lay eggs larger in proportion to their body size than any other bird. Most of the world's supply of kiwi fruit is also grown in New Zealand.
What is the most popular theme park in the United States?
Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, has more than 17 million visitors annually.
What other countries have disputes over lines drawn on maps?
Japan, China, and Taiwan all have a dispute over the Diaoyu/Senkaku Islands in the Pacific Ocean. India and Pakistan have an ongoing dispute over ownership of the northernmost region of Kashmir in India. China has disputed claims of sovereignty by Taiwan. North and South Korea are still in conflict over lines drawn by Korean and American forces that split the country in two.
What was the Rainbow Warrior?
In 1985, the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior was in the Auckland, New Zealand harbor when it exploded and sank, killing one Greenpeace staff member. It was later discovered that French secret agents planted bombs on board the Rainbow Warrior. In order to stop the organization from protesting French nuclear weapon tests in the Pacific. Following the incident, the French Minister of Defense and head of the Secret Service were forced to resign. New Zealand, a country very much opposed to nuclear weapons, maintained a poor relationship with France for many years following the bombing.
How wide is the Strait of Gibraltar?
The strait, which connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean between Africa and Spain, is 8 miles, 13 kilometers, wide at its narrowest.
Which explorer was named the Grand Imperial Eunuch by the Emperor of China?
The Chinese explorer Cheng Ho helped Emperor Yongle come to power in 1402. And in 1404 the emperor named Cheng Ho the Grand Imperial Eunuch. In 1405, Cheng Ho set sail on the first of his 7 voyages, which spread Chinese influence and knowledge throughout South Asia and Africa. China moved toward isolationism after Yongle died.
Where in Egypt do most Egyptians live?
About 95% of Egypt's population lives within 12 miles, 19 kilometers, of the Nile River. Since the rest of Egypt mainly consists of desert, the remaining residents live scattered across the country, primarily near oases or along the coast.
Where is the world's largest church?
The Basilica of Our Lady of Peace in Yamoussoukro, Ivory Coast, is the world's largest church, covering 100,000 square feet, 9,290 square meters. Built in 1989 by President Félix Houphouët-Boigny, the church has seating for 18,000 people. In 1983, Houphouët-Boigny relocated the capital of the Ivory Coast from Abidjan to his hometown of Yamoussoukro.
Why is there a tiny piece of Russia in the middle of Eastern Europe?
The important seaport of Kaliningrad, wedged between Poland and Lithuania, was annexed by the USSR at the end of World War II. Though once the capital of East Prussia and ethnically German. The Soviets quickly evicted the Germans and replaced them with ethnic Russians. In 1991 many of the autonomous republics within the USSR gained independence, though Kaliningrad lies west of these new countries. Its inhabitants are ethnically Russian and thus remained part of the Russian state.
What is an oxbow lake?
An oxbow lake is a crescent-shaped lake that is formed when the meander or curve of a river is cut off from the rest of the river during a flood, or when the curve of the meander becomes so large that the river begins flowing along a new path. The curve that remains becomes its own lake. These can commonly be seen along the Mississippi River system.
What is the difference between Central and Latin America?
Central America includes the countries that connect North and South America and are located between Mexico and Colombia. The 7 countries of Central America are Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. Latin America is a much broader term and includes Central America as well as Mexico and all of the countries of South America.
Who was Muhammad?
The Prophet Muhammad was the founder of Islam. He was born in Mecca in 571 and fled to Medina later in life. According to the Islamic religion, he received prophecies from God, which were subsequently written in the Quran, the Holy Book of Islam. Muhammad's death in 632 CE led to the expansion of Islam around Eurasia.
What is Benelux?
Benelux stands for Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, and represents an economic alliance between the three, that was formed in the 1940s. At the time Belgium was primarily industrial and the Netherlands was primarily agricultural. The two countries' economies complemented each other, a relationship strengthened by an economic union. Luxembourg, which has a varied economy and is extremely small, has long been closely affiliated with its two larger neighbors, and thus also benefited from the Union. Today, the countries are referred to as Benelux whenever referred to in terms of market analyses, commerce, and trade.
What are the largest cities in the Middle East?
Cairo, Egypt, is by far the largest city in the Middle East, with over 14.45 million people. Istanbul, Turkey, is an urban area with almost 11.3 million residents. And Tehran, Iran, is home to 7.7 million people.
What is Amur?
Amur is uncultivated pasture land. You'll find moors in the United Kingdom. In the United States most people call them fields or prairies.
Why did Macedonia's name cause problems between that country and Greece?
When Macedonia declared independence in 1991, Greece felt indignant that a modern country would use what it felt was a historically Greek name. Greece blocked trade to Macedonia until 1995, when the two countries signed an agreement of understanding. The official name that the United Nations recognizes is the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Although most countries refer to it as the Republic of Macedonia, its constitutional name.
What are the four main islands that make up Japan?
The northernmost island, Hokkaido, is home to the city of Sapporo. The largest island, Honshu, is the Japanese core area that includes Tokyo and Osaka Kyoto. The Japanese island of Honshu is the world's seventh largest island in the world, as well as the second most populous island in the world with 103 million people. It is the mainland island of Japan. Honshu covers 86,246 square miles, 223,656 square kilometers, which makes it larger than the island of Great Britain. In the south are the islands of Shikoku and Kyushu. Kyushu is the southernmost island and was the first island where foreign traders were allowed into Japan. It has a population of over 13 million. Besides the four main islands, Japan includes 2,000 smaller islands. Japan's population is 128 million people and is declining at a rate of 0.02% per year.
Which river carries more water than any other in the world?
Though the Amazon River is the second longest in the world, 4,000 miles over 6,400 kilometers. It carries more water to the ocean than does any other river in the world.
Where can you see the Great Wall?
There are several places where tourists may see the Great Wall that are within a netto 2-hour car ride from the capital city of Beijing. One of the most famous and most developed tourist areas is Badaling, where one can see both the Great Wall of China, in its restored and untouched splendor, and the nearby Ming tombs.
If I keep walking in a straight line, will the Coriolis effect cause me to veer?
If your body were completely symmetrical, and no one's is, and neither leg were longer and you were walking on perfectly flat land, then yes, you might start veering due to the Coriolis effect.
When was the first permanent British settlement established in the United States?
In 1607, the colony of Jamestown was established in Virginia by British colonists transported there by the London Company. Though subjected to many attacks by Native Americans, the colony was ultimately destroyed in 1676 by its own rebelling colonists in Bacon's Rebellion.
What is a coral reef?
Coral reefs are formed by the accumulation of calcium carbonate that comes from the external skeletons of tiny animals called coral polyps. The polyps live in shallow, warm water, and thus congregate around islands in the tropics, where coral reefs are abundant.
What is a meander?
Streams and rivers that have carved a flat floodplain commonly flow in curves known as meanders. These S-shaped curves vary by the size and flow of the river. The river flows faster on the outside curve of the meander, and therefore continues to cut and create a larger curve.
Was San Francisco destroyed by earthquake or by fire in 1906?
In 1906 a very powerful earthquake struck San Francisco, California, which sparked a fire that destroyed much of the city. In an effort to preserve San Francisco's image with residents and would-be visitors, official policy regarding the disaster stated that it was not the earthquake but mostly the fire that destroyed the city. Official books and publications produced after the earthquake referred to both the fire and the earthquake as having caused the damage. In fact, the earthquake did considerable damage to the city and killed hundreds.
Who was the first person to reach the South Pole?
In 1911, the Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen and the British explorer Robert Scott were racing against each other to be the first to reach the South Pole. On December 4, 1911, Amundsen and his crew of 4 reached the South Pole at 90 degrees south. Approximately 1 month later, Scott and his team arrived at the pole. Depressed from their defeat and with inadequate supplies of food, Scott and his team died while trying to return to their base camp.
Who else controls the price of gas besides oil producers?
There are many factors that influence the price of gas. Among them are the rising demand for fuel from developed countries such as the United States, new and growing demand from China and India, market speculation, and public policy. The refining industry, which is under government regulation, is also consolidated into the hands of a very few global refiners. This has the potential for removing competitive pricing.
What are the 7 wonders of the modern world?
According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, the 7 wonders of the modern world include the Channel Tunnel between England and France, the CN Tower in Toronto, Canada, the Empire State Building, New York, the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco, the Itaipu Dam between Brazil and Paraguay, the Netherlands North Sea Protection Works, and the Panama Canal.
Which country first granted women the right to vote?
In 1893, New Zealand became the first country to give women the right to vote.